Also, what about language? Do I need to keep myself G-rated here?
I don't give a fuck.
My kind of answer.
To answer your question.
That is definitely my kind of answer.
All right. Welcome to Dead Headspace. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and all other major platforms. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined by my co-host, Brendan LaFaro.
Hello, everybody.
And today we have author, martial artist, and more, Jonathan Maberry.
Hi, guys.
Jonathan, we like to start out by asking our guests what got you into horror, and you got such a wide variety of things we could ask, but I figure that probably is the best one to go with.
Well, my grandmother got me into horror. She was, if you can imagine Luna Lovegood from the Harry Potter books as an old lady, that's my grandmother. She believed in absolutely everything: witches, vampires, ghosts, ghouls, goblins. She believed in everything, but also, when I was a kid, she not only told me those stories and got me interested in, the things that go bump in the night, and had me read a lot of it, but she also told me a lot about the anthropology and some of the archaeology that is attached to this, because she wanted me to have context. She wanted me to believe that all of that stuff was part of what she called the larger world, that it was actually in its own way natural. So I got involved in horror that way. And then from there, I started watching monster movies as a kid and, reading horror books.
Oh, is that when you say monster movies? Are you talking about Universal monster movies?
Universal, definitely. I was born in the 50s, raised in the 60s. So we also had the early Hammer films, heavily edited for American television. We had Dark Shadows on TV. We had The Outer Limits. We still had reruns of The Twilight Zone. I mean, there was a lot of good horror back then, and plus a stack of EC comics my brother had left me when he went off to Vietnam.
That makes sense. I had a strong sneaking suspicion you were an EC Comics guy.
In fact, one of the things I did a couple of years ago is Dark Horse Comics has been released Vault of Shadows and the other books in hardcover editions. I actually wrote the forward to one of those.
I didn't know that. That's very cool. What issue is that?
Volume 3. Okay. For Vault of Horror.
All right. Absolutely. That's cool. As far as Twilight Zone goes, I can relate. I mean, I'm a 90s kid, but my godfather, you wouldn't know him in anything. He's just an independent actor, but he always said, listen to the commentary, free lesson, which I later applied to writing. And he also got me into Twilight Zone, and that cool. holds up today. Everything about it.
So does the original Outer Limits, which was, of the two, my favorite of the two, because it was more science fiction-y with some horror, whereas Twilight Zone was more fantasy with a little science fiction and horror. Though now, as an older, 60-something, Twilight Zone is a little more influential on me than Outer Limits, but Outer Limits was the show I watched a lot in the 60s.
Oh, okay. That's pretty neat. Today, you made a really neat announcement about the Weird Tales exception. So for those that aren't aware, this is an exaggeration for any kind of emphasis. You had 10,000 submissions, and you had to pick one.
Yep.
What? Excuse. I apologize if I got his first name wrong. James Bible.
Jake
Bible. That's his surname, Bible.
Yeah, Bible.
That's neat.
And he's from the South, so it seems. But Jake wrote a really good story. There were a lot of really good stories, and there were some stories that were really exceptional, but they hewed a little too close to things we'd already bought for that issue. I've got stuff from Sean McGuire and Dacre Stoker and other people. So we had to make sure it was something that's wasn't going to hit the same theme, but also was an exceptional story. And there were about 25 that I wish I could have bought all of them, but we had one slot to fill.
How do you do that? Because I hear from so many seasoned authors, be a slush reader, it helps you become better. But 10,000, how do you do that?
Well, first off, a lot of them never made it past me opening the email for a couple reasons. We have writer's guidelines which explain what you're supposed to write, the format, the genre, the word length, everything else. And I'd open emails. We said we wanted something up to 5,000 words. Up to 8,000 words. I'd get stuff that's 25,000 words. I'd get novels. I'd get flash fiction. I'd get poetry. None of the, I mean, it may be good flash fiction, poetry, whatever, but I'm not going to read it because that's not what I'm buying. I'm buying a short story. And we'd also get stuff that's clearly just straight science fiction or straight horror or straight fantasy, but doesn't have the weird element to it. I got a lot of stuff that was weirdly in the wrong font. You know, everyone's allowed to have their house rules because it's a hoop we want people to jump through to show that they pay attention to our guidelines, and also are serious pros because pros follow the rules in that regard. But we get stuff, you know, like in Comic Sans Serif, we get stuff in all italics, wrong font size, wrong everything. And it's like those just got, I mean, that was thousands got eliminated just because they didn't read the freaking guidelines.
Wow.
What was left was still a whole lot. So I had our editorial assistant, Dana Fredstein, read a bunch. I read a bunch. And then when we finally, you know, it took over a month for us to get it down to a smaller group of about 100 stories. And but a lot of them were from people I know. So to keep it from being biased, I got 3 colleagues who are really good writers, all of whom have some editing experience, but who aren't necessarily in the horror community. So they read through that list. And they gave me a list of top 10, and then I reread those top 10 and picked Jake's story.
Okay, wow. That sounds like an intense month.
Yes, people wonder why writers drink. I'm just saying.
What's your drink of choice?
Oh, actually, water. This is unsweetened iced tea. But when it comes to alcohol,
yeah,
I'm a big fan of good old bourbons, and I like there are definitely some good bourbons out there. But my cocktail of choice is a Bombay Sapphire Martini, straight up 3 olives, hint of vermouth.
Very specific.
The man knows what he wants.
I don't know too many martini drinkers who aren't specific about it. I mean, there's a way we like it, and
that's fair. Because I'm a regular Irish American. I just like whatever, as long as it's alcohol.
And I like wheat beers too, you know.
Okay.
So not an IPA fan, but I'm a wheat beer guy.
I don't know a lot of IPA fans.
Seems to be a recurring theme in the horror community is the anti-IPA statement.
Yeah, and my son, who doesn't watch a lot of horror, doesn't read horror, is an IPA guy, so I think that proves the model right there. What are you drinking, by the way? I just saw that bottle just go up and down real quick.
Sam Summer.
Oh, nice. Good choice.
So last year, and I bring this up just in case anyone's like, hey, you already asked that. Last year I interviewed you when issue 363 came out for Weird Tales magazine. I bring that up because the answers were stellar, but I'm curious, since this is a different type of format, maybe there will be a little bit of expansion on it. And even if there isn't, that's still fine. So if you're okay with it, I just got like 4. Okay, cool. How did you get involved with Weird Tales?
Well, it's a pretty complicated version of the story because there's a lot of different ways. But what it boils down is they reached out to me. There's a new group that took over Weird Tales. They reached out to me originally to write a story for them. And I wrote I had never written a good old-fashioned swords and sorcery story, and I wrote one for them with a new character that I figure I'll pursue at some point. And then shortly after they got the story, they said, well, you know, we're actually we'd like some help picking, you know, crafting the magazine. And I said, well, you know, if you're talking about me being involved in the editorial side of things, I have some requirements, and my requirements are, much as I love the Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard stories and so on, as you know, I grew up with them. There are a lot of them that have a lot of racism, sexism, and homophobia in there, and those are 3 buttons of mine. You know, granted, I'm a straight white male, but I'm a big one for tolerance, not intolerance. So I said, you know, the stories can have those elements because sometimes you need to explore that in the story. You can't write a story about racism without having racism in the story, right? But if it becomes clear that that's the viewpoint of the writer and it's informing the story, which you see a lot with Lovecraft and with Howard, then no, I'm not going to do that. I want stories that also go beyond just the standard, you know, white male viewpoint. Not to the exclusion of any group, but to include as many groups, different races, different sexual orientations, different countries. You know, what scares us and what we define as weird is different depending on who's telling that story. So I said I would want to curate the issue if I'm going to do it, or I'm not involved. And they said, okay. So they let me curate the issue. I was editorial director for the first issue, but actually I was the editor. The name editor was actually stepping down. So I actually edited that issue, and now I'm the official editor of Weird Tales. And I've, again, curated the next issue and the one after that. The one thing about Weird Tales, though, is we were hoping to be able to put out an issue every couple of months, but our principal financial backer died.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, taking all of the finances with her. So we no longer had all that money. So it delayed everything by over a year. And so our next issue will actually probably be in October. And then we'll be publishing a little more often after that.
Okay, and these questions are actually for selfish reasons, but I feel like people will also be interested. I loved it. I wanted to buy. I was hoping I could buy like a bundle annual package. Is that ever going to be an option?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm so not involved. Okay. I believe there's something on the website. It's I think it's weirdtales.net. I believe it is. I believe there's something there on it, but I'm not part of that end of things. I'm just the guy picking the stories.
Okay.
The publisher and so on. In fact, we're going to have a meeting on this pretty soon because we're going to be making some announcements about things like subscriptions and some of the cool things that are happening as a result of it. Some of which I can't talk about now, but it's really, really cool. Some things I can, like we're now doing an audio version of each issue. The first one's already out, and that will be really cool. And we're going to a couple other fun things that we have planned. A little bit of TV and film interest.
That's going to be one of my questions, is the whole history of Weird Tales. It covers, at this point, a century, I believe, or close to, what, it started in 28 or 29?
23.
Oh, okay, so close to a century. There's a lot of interesting avenues you could pursue as far as film goes. I'm not going to, clearly, you're not going to talk about that now, so I'm not going to bug you about that.
Here's what I will say. We're more interested in pursuing film and TV based on the stories that appear in our new issues. Because they speak to the current sensibility of Weird Tales. And we have some great stuff. Like Victor LaValle just won a Bram Stoker Award for his story. And he was actually the first writer I asked, because specifically for him, I'll give you an example. He wrote a novella a few years ago, called The Ballad of Black Tom, where he had taken one of H.P. Lovecraft's most overtly racist stories and retold it from the point of view of the black character. And it was a gut punch of a story. Got on everybody's best of lists. So when I said I'd agree to do Weird Tales, I said, I'm going to start by, first person I want to call was Victor LaValle. So I called him and said, hey, Vic, you bruised people with that Ballad of Black Tom. How about you come and draw some blood for Weird Tales? And he was like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm in. And he did. And that story, Up from Slavery, is brutal. Oh my God, what a great story. And then we had Lisa Morton write a great story about, the problems of being, like the domestic model for, like the wife stays at home model. That whole thing was explored. We had some fun going in some interesting new directions. And the next issue, we've got, again, another lineup of fantastic talent going in other directions. So yeah, there's film interest and TV interest, both. But it's going to be based on what we're producing now. It's our Weird Tales.
That's smart. So I imagine legality-wise, you got it like under control. Now, for Victor's story, that was the first issue for Weird Tales I've ever read. I'm just a history guy, so I was like kind of interested in. I've read about all the authors in their past, the major ones from the 30s and 40s, what have you. But Weird Tales 363 was the first full front to back I read. I loved everything about it because, like, you start off with I forgot her name. I gotta look at my notes. Margaret Brundage. That's it. Margaret Brundage. The cover that was yep, there it is. So for just audio listeners, it's a
See, here's the original Margaret Brundage painting from a cover of Weird Tales. So we had an artist do an homage to it.
Right, and that was pretty awesome, and it got me interested to learn about Margaret, and she's like the queen of pulp fiction covers. God! I looked at her artwork; it's amazing. Yeah. Do you have the book?
The book of Margaret Brundage artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it around somewhere, but also have an actual copy of the original Weird Tales for one of our covers.
That's cool.
Oh, wow.
What is that's? Let me guess. From the 30s.
Yeah, this was September 1933, and it's a Robert E. Howard story, a Conan story, The Slithering Shadow.
That's so cool.
And with a Margaret Brundage cover. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Our next cover is going to be a little different. I can't drop the information yet, but it's going to be cool. But we're going to have a cool thing with that next cover. Once we've finished, get the cover all ready, we're going to do a contest where we'll publish the art that's going to be on the cover, and have people submit flash fiction based on that piece of art, because the art does not belong to any story. And then whoever we pick, that story will be in that issue 364.
That was actually going to be my next question, because I just bring it up because you just talked about, but I did submit to that too. That was pretty neat. And as someone that's like, I'm in a weird place where I'm not new to writing, but I'm also not like this guy with a long track record. So it's like, hey, that's interesting approach, because you guys can potentially have a new name where you're like, yeah, we were one of the first to publish him or her. And it's for Weird Tales, which is like the go-to magazine.
And that's one of our goals. Aside from the big names that I'm bringing in, I do want to bring in some writers who either it's their first publication or it's the first major publication. Like we have a sword and sorcery story in issue 364 from Marguerite Reed, and she had one novel out, had a couple short stories, but she's not very well known. I mean, she won a Philip K. Dick Award, some years ago for the novel, but that's a whole different genre, different audience. And I asked her to write a sword and sorcery story for me, and it's a uniquely female voice for writing a sword and sorcery. She's not trying to write a Conan story with a woman instead of Conan. It's a uniquely female story, and it's really great. But that's the sort of thing we're going to do. We're bringing these new voices out and letting people discover these people, these writers, and also give the writers a more international platform so that hopefully it can jump them forward a bit.
Yeah, reading, me and Brennan, we actually got really big into Australian authors, and they got so many neat things to offer. I got other friends that are into, he referred to it as the Chinese Lovecraft minus the racism. I forget the author's name, but just listening to...
Are you talking about Lee Murray, by any chance?
I remember on the cover it was like a weird mutant snake person. I don't know if it was Lee Murray.
Sounds like Lee. Into the Mist. A couple books anyway. She's one of New Zealand's top science fiction writers.
Okay.
Horror writers. So she's run like a whole bunch of their Julius Vogel Awards. But Australia has a lot of good science fiction and fantasy writers. I mean, that's the point. There's a lot of writers all over the world. We want to be able to draw those voices in and use Weird Tales to amplify that.
Absolutely. And I did notice. On the Weird, because I've been following Weird Tales when you guys, I don't know if you just brought back the Facebook group or if it's new, but I joined it when the new issue came out, and I didn't have any issues with what you said about what your goals are, with what you just described, like leaving out the racism stuff. Maybe it's because it's social media, but I saw some weird remarks about people having issues, people. Oh yeah. Putting words in your mouth like, hey, well, the last editor, she was great. Like, you didn't say that she wasn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. Anne Vandermeer was the last editor, and she was brilliant. Her run on Weird Tales is my favorite run on Weird Tales. And I've always been a big fan of hers, and I've spoken, long before I was involved in Weird Tales, spoken about it. But the people who were running the magazine before fired her, and it was unfair, and it was badly done. Left a bad taste in people's mouths, and again, that was the old regime. I don't want to be blamed for what someone else did, and I'm not going to take the blame for it. I'm not going to be an apologist for someone who's not even part of the magazine anymore. So I got slammed a little bit. If people want to use social media to slam me unfairly, go ahead. It's social media. The thing that matters to me was for every negative comment, and there were maybe 30 or 40 scattered through different platforms. Thousands and thousands of people excited about the new direction of Weird Tales. So sometimes the cranky voices are the ones who yell loudest, but they aren't necessarily the ones who are representative of what people think out there.
Yeah, because again, I'm a '90s kid. I wasn't a kid that was into Fangoria and all that. I don't know why. I just watch horror films and horror TV, but I mean, if I'm a kid, or I'm in my 30s. Like, this is a great time to be jumping into the Weird Tales
It
wagon.
really is. It
Um,
really is.
I just had one more question about it. So, in the interview, I asked you a question, and you had such a crazy cool answer. I asked you something along the lines of what your history with the magazine is, and I forget who your mentor is, but could you go over that?
Yeah, it's very complicated because again, there's a couple different ways in which I got involved in Weird Tales, but the main thing is, um, I was kind of the hairy little mascot for a couple different groups of professional writers. My middle school librarian was their secretary. A group that met in Philly, where I grew up, and one that met in New York. The Philly group, known as the Hyborian Legion, was L. Sprague de Camp, who the guy who took the unfinished Conan manuscripts and brought Conan back in the 50s and 60s. Harlan Ellison was there. A bunch of other folks were there. Whoever was in town at the time, and we were at Harlan's at DeCamp's house in Villanova, I believe it was, and a little stone statue fell off the shelf and hit me in the head. And I picked it up and said, "What the hell is this?" Because it was his face with tentacles all over it. And DeCamp said, "That's Cthulhu," and Harlan Ellison said, "No, it's Cthulhu." And they got into a screaming match about it. And I'm like, "Who the hell's this?" So they introduced me to the whole idea of cosmic horror and so on. And one of the things that at the end of that is DeCamp gave me some issues of Weird Tales to go home and read, and under a sentence of death if I damage them. This was 1971, so the issues were not quite as antique as they are now.
Right.
But I was very careful. Brought them back, and then they started talking to me about Weird Tales. And Lynn Carter was there, who had written a book about Lovecraft. August Derleth was August. No, I'm sorry. Robert Bloch was there.
Oh wow!
So it was a really interesting group. And the New York version of their group didn't have a name, but it was Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, Avram Davidson, Lee Brackett, people like that, and it was pretty insane. I got to be mentored by all these folks as a kid, and that I have been grateful for that my entire life.
Okay. I'm just gonna say I Am Legend because I read it in one of Stephen King's books. I forget which nonfiction book, but he said okay. That has to be it. Yeah, he lists like so many great books and authors. I Am Legend. He talks so highly of it. I got it. I bought it right away, and I'm like, I'm in love with this. You listed off like all the biggest stars of those decades.
Well, Matheson is interesting. Matheson and Bradbury are the two most influential mentors I had, and Matheson probably the single most influential on how I structured my entire career, because his whole thing was, don't be pigeonholed. If you like to write horror, but if you want to try something else, don't say, "Oh, I'm a horror writer and I can't do that." Go do it. Because if you think of his books, I mean, you have I Am Legend, What Dreams May Come, Stir of Echoes, Shrinking Man, Legend of Hell House. He's all over the place in terms of his genre. And for Christmas 1972, he gave me a signed 1954 edition of I Am Legend.
Oh my
which
God.
is in a safe deposit box. Bradbury the same year gave me a signed first edition of Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh, so jealous.
Yeah, the funny thing is, the first time I met Bradbury, I was 12. First time I met him, I had no idea who he was because I hadn't been introduced to his work before. So The librarian is, "And this is Ray Bradbury." And I'm like, "Oh, are you a writer too?" And Harlan Ellison fucking died when I said that. He is over there, like, just about to piss himself. And Bradbury's like, yeah, I've taken a swing at it once or twice. Yeah. Later on, I realized how monumentally stupid a question that was. Hey, I was 12. What can I say?
That's hilarious. Fahrenheit 451. That's one of the greatest science fiction books I've ever read, man.
Yeah, and very influential book.
I would say for probably most writers. And did he have the same attitude as Richard Matheson? Because it feels like he did. Because Ray Bradbury wrote in whatever the fuck you want to write in.
Yeah, well, one of the things Bradbury told me was, a writer writes. That's as far as you should define it. Whatever comes along. And he wrote science fiction, fantasy, mysteries, westerns. He wrote for Weird Tales. Early Bradbury stuff was in Weird
the
Tales.
50s, I think, right?
Yeah. And what's fun about that, my other history with Weird Tales, my wife's grandfather, Oscar J. Friend, who was a pulp fiction writer, editor, and literary agent, was the literary agent for almost all of the guys in the 40s and 50s who wrote for Weird Tales. Wow. Ian O. Binder, the two Binder brothers who did the Adam Link stories, the robot stories.
I've only heard of them. I don't know.
If you ever saw the original Outer Limits, there was an episode with Leonard Nimoy about a robot who accidentally who finds a guy dead and he's put on trial for his life. They think he's a murderer, and Leonard Nimoy is the defense attorney defending him. But it's based on those stories. Manly Wade Wellman, who pretty much pioneered the Appalachian horror genre. All these guys were clients of the Otis Klein agency, for which her grandfather was the junior partner. So I have boxes and boxes of stuff from the agency, because I wound up inheriting all the stuff because nobody in the family knew what they were. I got all their contracts, the correspondence. I got handwritten notes back and forth with Isaac Asimov, because they were selling the very first foreign rights for science fiction writers, and he's like, "Oh, nobody in Europe's going to want to read American science fiction." I'm sorry, Ike, but you may have been wrong about that. But he was Oscar Friend was involved in Weird Tales as well, as kind of an advisor and talent scout for it. So I went up not only being involved in Weird Tales from my own past, but from my wife's side of things as well.
If I'm writing this story, man, you're destined. It's like, it makes sense as the author, like he should end up running the next regime of Weird Tales.
Well, my life has not always been pleasant, but it has never been boring. And I have been very, very fortunate, and I'm very grateful about the people I've met along the way who have been influential. People who have directly mentored me or have just simply served as really great examples for me, which was good, because I came from a very troubled neighborhood, very troubled family, really abusive home. And the people I met along the way kind of helped nudge me in the right direction, told me that I'm like, one of the things that I learned from Bradbury Matheson is that, if you don't like your life, revise it, rewrite it into the version of it you want to be. So as a kid, I'm like, well, I defined myself as a knocked around kid. Why not define myself as a writer? And that's one of the things they told me is, as a writer gets to imagine worlds and write them and be the god of each world you create. And, go do that. Who cares what your childhood is? Use it as rocket fuel to go somewhere else.
So fiction saved your reality, and I guarantee that you're responsible for probably someone's in your situation, like kids that are probably not loving their life and reading what you write, and they're inspired, man.
I've been pretty frank about, when I talk to groups of kids, because I write, young adult stuff too. When I talk to groups of kids, I don't pull any punches about, how hard life can be, because I know a lot of them, like last year I was down in Brownsville, Texas, right on the border, and a lot of these kids, their families are a mess. They're dirt poor. They got real hard lives. A lot of them are mixed race, and they're getting bullied and having a lot of intolerance just because of their their ethnic background and so on. And it's bullshit, But they don't get to hear from people who have been through hard stuff, because a lot of people who go to schools and talk try to give them sanitized versions of the world, like everything is roses and puppies. Fuck that. I came up hard, and you can either be defined by your childhood, or you can make yourself into the version of you want to be, and that's what I talk about. So I don't know if I have directly influenced, but I've tried to be directly frank with them and say, look, I came from a shit environment. You're coming from a tough environment. If I can do it, you can do it.
That's great.
There's no proof that you can't do it.
Yeah, Brendan.
I'd say it's just a numbers game too. You said, I don't know, for sure that I've made a difference, but I would place a bet that you have, and I would place a bet that it's been more than once. That the kids, they need to hear that. They need to hear the fact that I had it tough, and and it sucked, and I picked myself up by the bootstraps because that's kind of what you have to do. I worked my ass off, and I wrote my own story is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I don't do it to try to, if somebody comes and tells me that I was a good influence on that, that's really wonderful to hear. I don't do it for that reason. I do it to actually try to influence people. I don't need the accolade. What's interesting though is the thing that I've seen the most is that some of my books encourage kids to read who don't necessarily read. The Rotten Ruin books, my post-apocalyptic zombie series, I've actually won a whole bunch of awards from around the country from statewide awards for that book because it's a book that encourages reluctant readers to read. And that's friggin' wonderful. To excite a kid enough about reading that they don't just read your book, they go and read any book they can grab. That is that's worth more than any paycheck I'll ever get. That's incredible.
That's
a couple
awesome.
times I may have ugly cried a little bit about that.
That's a valid reason to.
You made a comment before. You said I'm not doing it for the accolades, and I apologize, but I'm going to pour some more accolades on my. I don't think I've mentioned this before on our show, but my older son is dyslexic, and we had pulled him to homeschool about 3 years ago. He just really, really tough time reading. They were clocking him at a kindergarten level at the end of second grade. And we couldn't get him to love reading. It was so hard for him, and it was so frustrating to him. And we eventually stumbled on a couple series of books. The two that stick out to me were the Ferengi K. Stein books by a guy named Jim Benton, written in just such a way with a lot of illustrations for, a kid that really requires those visuals.
Sure.
But an interesting kind of fun, almost, kind of horror sci-fi story. The other one that sticks out is the Dog Man and the Captain Underpants books. And the guy who wrote those, and I'm spacing on the name right now, will detail, his kind of battle almost with ADHD and how creating those comics, creating those stories really kind of helped him learn to love to read. I hope I'm not putting words in that guy's mouth, but so I mean, for an author to create books to help somebody, that might have a tough time nurturing that love of reading, like that absolutely deserves accolades. I'm absolutely into that.
Thanks, I appreciate it. But there are a lot of people out there doing it too, and that's one of the things I love about the modern writing era, especially with YA and middle grade. There are a lot of writers out there and publishers who are really interested in doing that. In fact, one of the things about dyslexia, I have dyscalculia, which is this dyslexia but with numbers.
Yep.
But one of the things about dyslexia is a lot of those kids are really good visual learners. And things like comic books, there's a whole new wave of graphic novels and comics being written for that group so that they see the story with minimal words and they can understand and get the education, get the immersion in literature without necessarily having to see those big blocks of gray text all the time. And I'm actually working with DC Comics on something right now, a little hush hush, but it's for that same thing.
That's awesome. And I mean, I don't even have to ask, but I mean, I fought the battle myself on more than one occasion about the legitimacy of graphic novels as a form of reading. People will say, well, it's not the same as opening up a book that's all words. And I would disagree,
Yeah, a lot of people would disagree because, and we've proved the model now. I mean, there's so many graphic novels out there, things like Ghost World and what's the one set in Iran? I forget.
Persepolis.
Yeah, Persepolis. There's a lot of them out there. Mouse, my God, Art Spiegelman's books. There are a lot of books, a lot of graphic novels out there that there's no way you can point to that and say that's not true literature. You just found a different way to tell a story. It's no different than if an actor goes on and does a soliloquy from Shakespeare. It's still performance. It's still literature. There's any way that gets us or gets that to a reader or somebody who's willing to learn, then it's a good way, no matter what way it is.
To a degree, I think that argument even also carries into like audiobooks. There are people out there who will say that, it's not legitimate reading to listen to an audiobook. And again, I would disagree.
Yes.
As a teacher, you see so many different learning styles, and to say that, the way that one person intakes a book versus the way, or a story even, versus the way another person intakes it, is not valid, is just ridiculous.
It is. I mean, look at the millions of blind folks who have learned to literature because of audiobooks, books for the blind. You can't tell me they are not deeply learning just because they're vision impaired. That's bullshit. So, you are correct. And any way in which a story can be told that will reach the heart and mind of the reader, listener, whatever, is a good way. And there's now a mountain of literature in support of that. Granted, it doesn't always get as much respect in every part of our country, but it is growing, and that's good. In fact, it's funny. Right now, I'm doing an audio only project. I'm doing a 3 novella project for Audible that's going to be audio only, because there are people who don't like to read but do like stories. So we're giving them stories.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk a little bit more about your work in comics. How did you kind of get started in that?
Funny thing about that. First off, actually, I just happen to have, because I'm about to frame it, the very first comic I ever bought with my own money.
Oh,
Fantastic Four.
For just audio listeners, it's the Fantastic Four. What issue is that, Jonathan?
It's issue 66. What Lurks Behind the Beehive?
How old is that?
This is 1965 ish. But it was the introduction of the character, him, who later becomes Adam Warlock, who's going to be in the next Guardians of the Galaxy film. But when my brother went to Vietnam, he left me a stack of EC comics, and he left me a stack of mixed comics, mostly Marvel. But this was talking 1964, 65. He left me this stuff, and I got hooked on comics. Roll forward, and I was a Marvel kid most of my life. I got to DC. I followed Jack Kirby over to DC when he went to DC. Got into the Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, Green Lantern eras, and the Fourth Kingdom, all that stuff. And then after I started writing novels, my agent and I were trying to strategize how best to get on Marvel's radar, how to pitch to Marvel, because we had no connection to Marvel at all. I didn't know. I knew of people who were writing for Marvel, but you can't always ask someone, hey, can you introduce me? It doesn't always work that way. And I was kind of a new kid on the block still. This is late 2008, so I was only like 2.5 years into my fiction career, right? And then out of the blue, 2009, and out of the blue, I get a phone call from Axel Alonso, the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, just like out of the blue. And he's like, Mr. Maberry, I just finished reading one of your novels, Patient Zero. It just came out, and I just read it, and I absolutely loved it. I got on an airplane, bought it at a kiosk in LA on the flight back to New York, and just thought maybe ask you if you'd possibly want to write for Marvel.
You bastard.
Yeah, stands as the stupidest question I've ever been asked. And I've told Axel that too. And I said, now luckily this was done by phone, and I have a good phone voice. Physically, I'm doing the Snoopy dance in my underwear all over my office, which for a guy who's 6'4" and built like Bigfoot is not a pleasant sight. That's a sight that's not going to go away quickly if you happen to see it. But on the phone, I'm like, well, of course, if we can work out the numbers, I'll put in touch with my agent, blah, blah, blah. You're off the phone, and I think I just sat there and stared at the phone for like half an hour. It's like, all right, they just asked me to write an 8-page Wolverine short as the backup feature for the Wolverine anniversary issue. Holy shit. So that's how I got into comics. And I had never seen a comic book script, so I actually went to back when Borders was open, went to a Borders bookstore. The one near me had a comic book rack in the cafe section. Sat down, picked up a couple comics, and tried to reverse engineer them. Because I know that when you write a comic, the writer decides how many panels and tells the artist what goes in each panel, as well as writes the dialogue. So I kind of reversed engineered it to teach myself what a script looks like. Wrote the 8-page script. They hired the amazing Tom Coker to do the artwork, which was a story called Ghost. It was a Wolverine, it's kind of a reflective Wolverine story. And they liked it so much, he said, all right, so how about you do a Punisher story for me? Oh. And the funny thing there was, he said, I want you to do a Punisher Max story, a 32-page standalone. And I hadn't really read comics since about 1990. I had no idea what Punisher Max was. I thought that was a character's name, Punisher Max. Turns out it's a hard R-rated version of the Punisher. And, when I found that out, I said, well, that's pretty intense stuff. Like, what do you want me to do? And he said, look, just go over the top. I want you to go over the top. Really, go over the top. So I did. I sent a script into him, and he called me and says, are you out of your fucking mind? This is like, we can't do this. You said over the top. Have you read what I write? And he's like, dude, over the top for comics and over the top for novelists are a different wattage. Just dial it back from like, this is going to get you arrested and on watch lists down to, it's hard R rating. I'm like, okay. So I did Naked Kills, and then I think the next one I did was a Wolverine. No, it was a Marvel Zombies Return. It was 4 of us. It was Fred Van Lent, David Wellington, Seth Grahame-Smith, who did Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and I. Bourbon may have been involved in the plotting process of that, and we each did a different issue of that. And I even have somewhere up on my shelf, somewhere up there is the Wolverine zombie statue that goes with that. That was done. But so that was how I got into comics, and I went up writing a bunch of different comics, mostly limited series. Captain America. I had my own little franchise within Marvel called Marvel Universe Versus. Did a Punisher, a Wolverine, and an Avengers one. And then they asked me if I'd like to write Black Panther comic. Ooh. Which that comes with a story. I'll give you the short version of the story. My father, who was a major asshole, ran the local chapter of the KKK. So God! Yeah. So he was and he was
underline asshole.
Yeah, and he was also a criminal and a bad guy. So my exposure to people of color as a child was understandably skewed. And when the Black Panther was introduced, I had a couple of my brother's old comics from Black Panther, from Fantastic Four, where they introduced Black Panther. And I showed that to my dad. I said, look, here's you always said black people have no intelligence. Here's a black guy that's smart, and he takes the comic and rips it up and belts me, and that was the end of the conversation. So then I started collecting the comics, keeping them over my grandmother's house. And then in 1971, they did an issue of Black Panther, of Fantastic Four, where he gets arrested in the Marvel Universe's version of South Africa. And Ben, the Thing and the Torch go to break him out. And I was looking at the cover and I'm thinking, okay, the Torch, when he's aflame, is red. He's a red man. The Thing is kind of brownish, and the Panther is black. Because Reed and Sue, the 2 really white characters, were not in that issue. And I'm thinking, this can't be an accident. So I took it into my librarian, the same librarian who was the secretary for those clubs of writers. And she said, well, it's a story about apartheid. I'm like, what's that? And she said, have you ever heard of the Jim Crow laws? And ever heard of Martin Luther King? I said, yeah, I heard of him. My father at a party when he died, he was a bad guy. And I'm like, she's like, ah! So she sat me down and explained the history of racism to me. And talk about opening my eyes, changing the whole trajectory of my life, because my father and I split in completely different directions from that point forever. And then I had told that story when I was being interviewed about something else I was doing at Marvel, and told that story. And Reginald Hudlin, who was a black writer, the founder of the BET network, in fact, had been writing Black Panther at the time. I was about to step down, and he saw me at that interview, and he's like, well, shit. I mean, here's a white kid whose ass was saved by T'Challa. We should get this guy in there, because that's a perspective we really haven't talked about. Has the Black Panther positively influenced white kids growing up? And so they asked me if I'd write the book, and I'm thinking, great, my father's going to spin in his grave like warp 9 at this point. I love that idea. And then he said, then for a little extra gift, I had part of my adult life, like 30 years of my adult life, I'd been teaching women self-defense. And so just as an extra gift, they decided they had T'Challa injured in a battle with Dr. Doom, and Shuri stepped up to be the Panther. So I got to write the feminist Black Panther for 2 years.
Ooh.
Fucking A. And It was great because even the actress who plays Shuri was really excited about my storyline. And there's rumors, I don't know if they're true or not, that some of my Doom War storyline may show up in the next Black Panther movie.
Oh wow!
Because
Yeah,
I introduced Doom, Fantastic Four, Submariner, and a bunch of other characters into my storyline, and Shuri was the Panther in that storyline. And right now, the only part of my storyline that went up in the first movie is the patterns on the Panther's costume come out of the alchemical symbols that we had him wear, when he was trying to reclaim his power after being injured. But
I love that movie. That's one of my
yeah.
So for me, my personal favorites is that and Iron Man 1. They're awesome.
Yeah, Iron Man 1 is one of my favorites. I love the Black Sabbath soundtrack,
Yeah.
And also Civil War, because the whole stunt team in Civil War, all the stunt doubles and are all friends of mine. And
Okay.
they're all big fans of my Joe Ledger Thriller novels. And that's a lot of fun. The guys who choreographed that fancy knife scene where Winter Soldier's flipping the knife around, they choreographed that. And Spencer Mulligan, who's the head of that team, went on to become the stunt double for the Punisher in the TV series.
Oh wow!
So it's kind of fun having friends who are in the Marvel movies. And actually, I can't name names yet, but one of the writers of one of the bigger Marvel movies is actually writing the screenplay to My Rotten Ruin for Alcon Entertainment.
Oh wow! Sign me up for watching that. For real quick though, for Iron Man 1, it was really interesting watching a superhero during when the we were fighting was it Afghanistan or Iraq at that point? It was 2008 or 9. Well,
Yeah.
when we were in the Middle East, in the earliest days, and it was just kind of weird but exciting to see Iron Man kill a bunch of Taliban.
Taliban and ISIS, not exactly. If you're going to pick villains, all right, those guys, we don't like those guys.
No.
What I'm glad of is that they didn't make all Middle Eastern characters bad guys.
That'd be
which
a bad
is
idea.
good. I mean, there are bad guys over there.
Mm.
Hate the bad guys. There's millions of people who are not bad guys. Don't hate everyone.
No, I agree. Did you happen to read that? What was it called? The Survivor Story. I can't remember. It's a SEAL team. Mark Wahlberg plays the.
The last man. I know which one you're talking about. It's about the one guy who
Lone Survivor. That's
Lone
it.
Survivor. That's it. Yeah.
I bring that up because when he gets he gets rescued by some locals, and I mean this one village is trying to prevent the Taliban, who know he's there, who Marcus Luttrell is there, the Navy SEAL. They're doing everything they can to save him.
Yep. I've got a buddy of mine, a writer, Weston Oakes, who writes a lot of thriller fiction, some horror fiction. Great guy. He's actually still military intelligence. He goes over there all the time, and he loves the villagers. He loves those guys. They're not the bad guys.
No.
There are plenty of bad guys, but the average villager, they're just trying to make a buck, feed their family, and get through life.
Yeah, what a tough life that's got to be.
Yeah.
So I believe I've heard you mention him. Maybe you're mistaken, but I feel like you've mentioned him at least a few times on your now older podcast, Three Guys with Beards. Is that?
Well, Wes was a guest on Three Guys with Beards, but he's also just been a good friend of mine forever. Since I got it. In fact, my first Bram Stoker Award, he was one of the presenters.
Oh, I didn't know.
I think that's when I met him.
Cool.
And his wife Yvonne Navarre is also a great writer, and they also wrote stories for V Wars for my anthologies. Wes is one of my go-to guys. He has a short story called "No One Survives the Beach" in the next issue of Weird Tales.
Oh.
His wife has a story in the following issue of Weird Tales.
Can I have your life just for a moment?
You weren't kidding. It's never boring.
Yeah, it was awful but not boring before. Now it's wonderful and not boring. I never thought as the kid growing up, in that really bad part of Philadelphia with a father like that, I never thought I'd be where I am now. I never thought I'd make it out of my teens, but I love my life and I'm very grateful for it. And I try to operate in what I call the no jackass zone. I only work with people who aren't jackasses, who actually believe that generosity of spirit and that inclusiveness will make the world richer and make our own jobs richer. People who are they don't like somebody because they're different. Doesn't matter whether it's a skin color, race, gender, whatever. Immediately decide that person's wrong. They're not the people I'm going to invite into my projects. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to invite a lot of people into a lot of projects, but they got to be pass muster as a decent human being.
That's kind of like a process that we have on this show. Like if you're a dick or whatever, we don't want to talk to you. Brendan had some interesting questions about YA before we get even further away from that. So why don't you ask him those, man?
I was kind of curious why you started writing YA, but we kind of covered that. So I guess I'm curious
about. We didn't cover why I started writing it.
Okay, let's hit it.
It's a quick story. So Christopher Golden, who was one of the three guys with beards, this is how I met him. He was editing an anthology called The New Dead. It's all stories, kind of new takes on zombie stories. And he, invited me into the anthology. He happened to know my editor was also the editor for the in-house editor for that anthology. So they reached out to me and said, would you write a zombie story for us? I had never written a zombie short story up to that point. And they wanted me to do something outside my wheelhouse. So I wrote one. I'd never written a story with a teenage protagonist, even though it was not a teen anthology. And I'd never written a post-apocalyptic story up to that point. So I decided to, since I just watched Night of the Living Dead, what happens 14 years later? Kid growing up 14 years after Night of the Living Dead in a small town. So, and, learning to be a zombie hunter by training with his brother. And the story, it was a novella, went into the anthology, got a lot of attention, which surprised me. And my agent, who usually doesn't read my short fiction, agents usually handle the longer stuff, read it and said, that's the opening of a young adult novel. And I'm like, no, it's not, because I hadn't read young adult since To Kill a Mockingbird in the 7th grade. So, So first she sent me a box of young adult novels, like Rick Riordan and Holly Black and Scott Westerfeld. I'm like, holy shit, why it got really great. And then she asked if she could shop it around. She shopped it. I said, you're not going to sell it. It's a waste of your time. One auction later, after several companies bid on it, Simon & Schuster made a deal we could not say no to, and it became at the time the biggest book deal of my career. And it's right now the second biggest selling novel of my career after Patient Zero. It's sold in countries all over the world. It's required reading in thousands of schools.
Wow.
And I had no intention of writing it as a YA. In fact, I'm not sure I really wrote it as YA even when I was finishing it and writing all the novels, because I was just telling a story about teenage kids, but I wasn't necessarily writing to any particular age group. I was less potty-mouthed. That was my only concession to YA. But I had, that's how I got involved in YA. And that book, I don't know, it's in 26th printing now. It's nuts. And the 7th in that series comes out. Lost Roads comes out in November. It's now being adapted as a webtoon, which are comics formatted for your cell phone. It's the #1 horror comic on Webtoon with 250,000 subscribers.
Holy shit.
And yeah, I know that's like holy shit. And it's being made into a movie with Alcon. So all that because my agent won the argument, as she has won every argument, telling me that I didn't necessarily know what I was writing in terms of genre, because I just write whatever story I want. So that's how I broke into YA.
I found I found Rot and Ruin in the weirdest place. My wife and I, my son's 7 months old now, but before the pandemic, there's this awesome, I don't know what kind of store you call it. It's got used baby products, like they're nice, and there's a very small book rack, and I'm looking through it, and I'm like, I'm like probably reacting to. I'm a large man too. I'm 6'3", and I have a shaved head and a beard, so like I don't look like I would get very excited over silly things, but I do. And I start freaking out. I'm like to my wife and mother-in-law, I'm like, "Hey, look it's Jonathan Maberry's book." They're looking at me like, "Okay." I'm like, "I interviewed him. This is so cool. I'm getting this." So that's my input for that. Brendan, go ahead, buddy.
Nice.
I love YA. I mean, you said that you ran through a couple among others, Rick Riordan books. I love his books. I got
Best
really
opening
into them.
lines of any writer ever.
You can fly through them in like a day or two, even the like 400 500 pagers. They're just so engaging.
Yeah.
I mean, I found myself picking them up at the age of probably like 22 23, and I've continued picking them up over like the last 10 years or so. But so I'm curious, you touched on this a little bit. Now that you've written in it, what is your definition of YA?
The only thing that defines YA for me is the characters of teenagers. The story is from their point of view. It's not an adult remembering back to when they were kids, which there are novels like that. This, like To Kill a Mockingbird, is technically told in retrospect, thinking back to her childhood. Whereas YA it's that kid's experience, and it's from their point of view, and the kids are the ones that solve the problem. No adults rescue them. The kids solve the problem. To me, that's YA. Everything else is just storytelling. I'm a little more picky about what defines middle grade, because middle grade is for 4th, 5th, 6th graders, and they're not as complex readers. So you tend to have a single character narrative, even fewer ensemble cast, fewer subplots that don't involve the main character, no romance. But in YA, I remember being a kid. There's a lot of romance, sex, drugs, and rock and roll in high school. So I don't pull punches when I write YA.
I don't think.
So there's a lot of nasty stuff that happens in the Rotten Ruin books. Holy crap!
Yeah, I don't think you're doing a service, not you, but if you're author or adult and you're just sugarcoating everything, especially to teenagers, you're not doing them you're gonna have them walk into the real world and say, "What the hell do I do?"
Yeah, I wish more adults were respected kids enough to tell them the truth. They try to shelter kids, and that all that does is make you vulnerable to the realities of life when you get there. I mean, you can, if it's something controversial and you're afraid of how the kid's going to react, let them read it and have a conversation. Kids also self-edit. If it's not for them, they won't read it. If it's not. So I'm not worried about. I don't. If I make any editorial changes, it's never because I think kids can't handle it. It's because maybe that doesn't work in this particular story or whatever. But I throw a lot of stuff in there. And in fact, when Rotten Ruin first came out, I was down at the Austin Teen Book Festival, and I don't know if you know who Paolo Bagliapucci is. He wrote the Shipbreaker, right?
No. I can't think of his name. He came out with the Wind-Up Girl.
Yeah, that guy. The two of us went up in a room with 500 librarians who were there to ask us very pointedly why there are adult content, why there's adult content in our books. And we're like, oh crap, because we had to defend every word, every scene, and so on. But he and I talked about it in the green room before that, and we're like, I'm going to go in there and tell them the truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat a goddamn thing. If they don't like the book, they don't like the book, And we were very frank with them. And then what happened is we went up with 500 advocates for our books. And the Scholastic, when they do the book fairs, they put our book covers on the cover of the box of troubled books, and all it did was sell more copies of the books.
I think it's Paolo Bagliapucci. I'm probably butchering it.
Bagliapucci.
It definitely sounds like you're butchering it.
Something like that.
I've listened to a lot of people talk, people who actually write YA talk about, their definitions of it. And a lot of the things you said kind of, mirror what a lot of other people who write it say. My definition used to be that I thought YA was toned down, and which is obviously the polar opposite of what you're saying. And I have come to agree with that. But I think my favorite thing that you kind of highlighted there was just saying that the teenagers or the main characters are going to solve the problem. There's not going to be a deus ex machina with the adults swinging in and saving the day. I like that kind of established tone.
Yeah, and one of the things when I talk about YA, especially if I'm talking YA zombie fiction, because I've spoken about that all over the world. And one of the things about that is in adult zombie fiction, for example, the adults usually can't work things out, and they wind up becoming a danger to one another, and then they all die at the end, or just a couple escape. Look at any George Romero film. George was a buddy of mine, but he had no optimism about adults.
Of course he was.
But in teen fiction, it's usually the teens at some point they gather knowledge and share it, and collectively they're powerful enough to overcome whatever their obstacle is. And that's why the young adult books like my Rotten Ruins series, like, a lot of other series, Harry Potter books and others, the kids, there are powerful adults in their lives, but the kids have to figure it out, because that's what kids do. Kids acquire knowledge, and they are more likely to work together as a team than adults are, because there's less ego involved in solving the problem. They just want to solve the problem. So I like the thread of optimism that runs through YA fiction. I think more adults would benefit from reading a lot of YA.
Yeah, and it's not a forced optimism, like you said, just kind of the way that that they operate kind of just results in that, be less butting heads over who's going to be the leader, and then getting everybody eaten and torn apart by zombies and all that.
Yeah.
Now, piggybacking off Patrick's, of course you did comment that George Romero. Didn't you edit an anthology with him?
I did. And in fact, so the way that came about, when I was 10, I snuck into a movie theater to see the world premiere of Night of the Living Dead. I went with a buddy of mine. Halfway through the film, right around the time the two young teenagers got blown up by the gas pump and the zombies were eating them, he split. He couldn't take it. My buddy left. He had bedwetting issues, like well into his 20s. I stayed to see it twice. So that same planet, different world, right? And I every day I would go back and sneak in. I know how to sneak into the theater. I would see the movie again. So roll forward to when I'm a published author, I do a lot of like Spooky Empire and a bunch of other conventions around the world, Dragon Con and so on. And I went up on a lot of panels with George Romero, and the man, I mean, he's pretty much the closest to a god to me in terms of my own personal pantheon. I mean, nothing is as influential. Well, I'd say Night of the Living Dead and I Am Legend, which there is actually a connection between the two. Those two were really landmark for me, pivotal for me. So I had the idea for an anthology of stories set around Night of the Living Dead. And I reached out to an editor, the editor who does my Joe Ledger books, and he said, well, if you can get George Romero's blessing, maybe ask him for a cover quote or something. And I'm like, all right. So I called him, and he's like, okay. I made the pitch for the thing. He said, okay, I have 3 conditions. And I'm like, oh crap. He said, condition 1, I want to co-edit it with you. And I'm like, okay, that's going to be pretty easy to agree to. He said, condition 2, I want to write a story for it. Like, I think we can manage that as well.
Yeah.
And condition 3, he said, I want you to write a story, and me, to write a story that connects my books, Dead of Night and Fall of Night, to Night of the Living Dead. He said, I love those books. They're my favorite zombie books, which, by the way, made me ugly cry a little bit. Favorite zombie books, they have smart science in it. And he says, when we did Night of the Living Dead, we didn't know anything about science. That's why the science in Night of the Living Dead makes no sense. He said, you did your research, but you have a character I really liked, and you appear to kill him off at the end of the second book. I don't want him dead. I want to figure a way to have him alive and bring him all the way to the house of Night of the Living Dead. If you can agree to that, then then you have my blessing. I'm like, yes. So that story, Lone Gunman, is in the anthology Night of the Living Dead. The book came out 5 days before George died. It was the last thing he completed before he died.
Wow.
And he was a great guy. We used to have these long rambling phone conversations, believe it or not, talking about Project Runway, which was his secret obsession. He loved that show. He got me hooked on the show. And here we are, 2 grown men talking about Project Runway and who got voted off unfairly. It's surreal that I was having those conversations with George Romero. I'm just saying. So the book came out, did really well, and it has stories in it by everyone. You figure you have Brian Keene, one of the great horror writers of our age, Carrie Ryan, who did Forest of Hands and Teeth, Chuck Wendig, who's a tremendous horror writer, Craig Engler, who created Z Nation, who's now the head of Shudder TV. You have Isaac Marion, who wrote Warm Bodies, Jay Bonansinga, who did all the Walking Dead novels, Joe Lansdale, great guy, Mike Carey, who did Girl with All the Gifts. and so on. You got and Neil Shusterman, who won the National Book Award. So we had this incredible lineup of writers. And right now, there's a little bit of TV interest, and that's all I can say about that right now.
That's amazing. And you know what? This is pure coincidence, but we recorded an episode last night with a comedian from Pittsburgh. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name's Matt Light. But as a joke, I had the intro of like what got you into horror. He worked with Doug Bradley, so I knew there was some horror connection with a wrestling company he had a part in that is no longer. But he said, I watched Night of the Living Dead, the same, not the remake, the one that you just described, the original George Romero one. It scared him so bad as a kid that he was done. He was your friend.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can't speak on the bedwetting issue. I don't know.
I bet he did.
I bet he did. See, that's the thing. Is a lot of people who live nowadays and who've seen so many zombie stories and The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, which had zombies in it, and they're so inundated with zombies they don't really know how this thing started. There was nothing like Night of the Living Dead until that movie came out. There was nothing like that, and it scared the hell out of. It was the first midnight movie that drive-ins would have midnight movie shows. That was the first midnight movie that Rocky Horror was the second, and
I didn't know that.
They that was the place you took your girlfriend around Halloween to see Night of the Living Dead. She would all but crawl into your shirt pocket. She was so scared. And it was a rite of passage to have been able to watch that with your eyes open, which was a thing back then. So yeah, and Romero was such a great guy. He was such a good friend. But yeah, I that was one of my dream projects. I've gotten to do. This is a weird thing about my career. I've gotten to do a number of my dream projects. I've gotten to write an X-Files novel and edit 3 X-Files anthologies. Got to write for Marvel Comics. I'm writing for DC now. I got to do edit an Aliens anthology.
That's cool.
I got to write a Predator short story, a Hellboy short story. It's crazy. My life is surreal. Even I'm not sure I'm awake. I think I might be dreaming all this. But if anyone wakes me up, I'll fucking kill them.
That's fair. I would do the same.
Yeah.
Did you happen to like my personal favorite Romero movie? And I don't know, for anyone listening, I don't know if you're aware, but the remake of Night of the Living Dead 1990 is a Romero movie. He directed it with most of his original crew. And Tony Todd is Ben. And Bill,
Tony's a buddy of mine too.
Tony Todd is?
Yeah.
Oh, obviously. I mean, like everyone.
Well, the thing about if you write this sort of stuff and you're in this world, you get to know these guys. Like Ken Faree from who played Peter in the original Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, we've been friends for a long time. Judith O'Day, who played Barbara, is a friend of mine. So you get to know them, and it's so cool. Galen Ross, who was in Dawn, and Eugene Clark, who played Big Daddy in Land of the Dead. It's fun because we were on panels together. We hang out together, and it's. I just saw Tony last. I forget where the hell I was. I forget which convention I was at. I think it was in FanX, maybe. Oh, FanX in Salt Lake City.
Pre-pandemic.
I was hanging out with Tony. What's that?
The pre-pandemic world.
Yes, the pre-pandemic world.
Now, I'm curious as to why we got this bullshit pandemic and not a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, zombies would be easier. We could at least evade them more, especially if they're the slow ones. Fast ones, I think I'm toast because I'm a good fighter, but I can't run worth a damn. So, if we get the Olympic sprint team zombies, I think I'm done.
The 28 days later ones are off the table.
Yeah, well, now here's a thing about that. 28 days later is technically not a zombie story because
it's the rage.
Yeah, but it is. But George Romero invented that genre too, with his movie called Crazies, 1972. Yep. And they borrowed a hell of a lot from the Crazies to make 28 Days Later, and also from Day of the Triffids too, in a lot of its setup. But George Romero created both the zombie genre and the fast infected genre. He doesn't get enough love for
it. I wasn't aware of the last part. That's pretty damn cool.
Yep.
Brendan, take it away, man. I'm still digesting everything.
All the royalties, all the respect, no matter how you zombie, you gotta hail to the king, baby.
Hail to the king.
So speaking of your ability to fight zombies, tell us a little bit about your experiences with martial arts. You are in the Martial Arts Hall of Fame, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Is Joe Lansdale in that?
I don't know. He should be, but here's the thing: there are a couple different martial arts halls of fame. I'm in two of them, and one is called the Action Karate International Hall of Fame. That's the Hall of Fame where you have people like Jet Li, Jackie Chan, Cynthia Rothrock, and so on. I was inducted into that in 2004, mostly because of my body of published works, nonfiction works. I was a nonfiction writer for years. Taught martial arts history at the college level, wrote hundreds of articles and training manuals for SWAT and special forces. So, I've written a bunch of stuff, and also, I was the expert witness for the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office for any murder cases involving martial arts. So I have a body of experience. I was a bodyguard in the entertainment industry. I've got a lot of, combat experience with this. So I was inducted into that, and also because a lot of the folks running this particular style of jiu-jitsu that I practice and teach, a lot of them have died off. I wound up being the last man standing, so I wound up getting inducted into the World Soki-ship Head of Family Council, which is another international Hall of Fame for Japanese-based martial arts. You're inducted in if you're the head of style. I was the head of family for the United States because everyone else just died. I don't know if I got that for merit or longevity. I'm not sure which one, but so yeah, I'm in a couple of those. But I've been doing jiu-jitsu since it's 56 years now. And I retired as an 8th degree black belt. And the thing with that is you stop testing after a certain point. And again, they keep promoting you if you are alive after a certain point. So around 6th, I think you stop testing, and then they just promote you if you're, do you have a pulse? Yeah, here's a belt. But I'm retired now. I do consulting stuff. I do workshops on writing fight scenes and action scenes. And my last gig before, I wish I still had this company, before I became a full-time writer, I had a company called Cop Safe that taught safe arrest and control workshops for law enforcement so they didn't overdo it and do too much and cause injury or death. And I wish the hell we had that company now. Because
that's a lot of really useful.
Yeah, I mean, I support Black Lives Matter, but I do want to say one thing about cops. Sometimes, some of the cops out there are doing bad things because they're assholes, and a lot of them are racist and so on. Or the ones who are doing the damage, a lot of them are. But there are also cops who overdo it because they haven't been trained properly. A lot of departments don't have the funding to train them properly, so they're out there and they're humans. They panic, and they overdo it. They cause harm when they simply don't know what else to do because they haven't been sufficiently trained. The issue is with the people who provide the training, not preparing them for it. So there's that, and there's the racism. The racism thing, that's somebody else's issue to handle. Our company was about teaching them how to stay on the lowest tier of the force continuum so that they didn't hurt people. And I wish I still had that company.
Yeah, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, so I won't keep you guys long. But I mean, the numbers of people with disabilities who are killed by officers who just aren't sure how to react, it's staggering if you look it up. And that's definitely something that could be very much helped by the proper training.
Almost all of it can be helped by proper training. People talk about defunding the police, and which is actually not what the main protesters are saying. They're saying change some of the funding for other things, but within that funding, more of it should go for training, psychological training, personality training, and also physical training, so that we don't have these conflicts. Cultural sensitivity, shouldn't be just a course you sit through. It should actually reach you. And there's a lot that can be done to fix the system. And I hope that this will, after all the protests are addressed, and my sympathies are definitely with people who have been hurt by this. I would like to see a move toward proper training and restructuring with police departments. I think that'd be. We need police, but we don't need bad police. We need more and more of the good police, and there are good police out there.
Mm-hmm. It'll definitely be interesting to see how Minneapolis, kind of leads the charge on that, when the dust settles.
All eyes are on them.
Yep.
Now for Three Guys with Beards, I did want to ask. You guys did mention in your last episode that Bracken McLeod and I forget the other two who are
Tom
taking over.
Snigoski. Tom Snigoski.
Okay. Who's the third one?
James Moore. He was,
Oh,
one
yeah,
of the founding
right.
members.
Yeah. Okay.
They're now the new Three Guys with Beards. Christopher Golden and I had to back off because we're just simply too busy. James will do a great job. Bracken is a fantastic guy, and Tom Snigoski's been a friend of all of ours for years. He's basically the funniest grumpy old man you'll ever meet. And I say that even though I think he's younger than I am, but he has the grumpy old man gene. I think he was a grumpy old man in preschool, probably.
Of the three, and it hasn't been a lot. I've conversed with Bracken. I like him. He's a nice guy. He's got a fiery temper with the right things, and I mean, I'm a fan. I would love to talk with him.
He has a great name, Bracken McLeod. I mean, it sounds like an action hero, Bracken McLeod.
I think he was in Braveheart.
Yeah.
I think Jonathan said he's going to be in that sword and sorcery story that he's writing.
I should name a character Bracken McLeod. It'd be great.
I mean, to go back to that story, I loved it because it's different than anything I really have read before, and I do too. Like you, I like crows. I like ravens. They're cool animals. I want to see kind of more with that main character and the crow.
Julian Gunn, Julian Touched by God. He's a fun character. I've only written the one story. I was going to pitch a Julian novel, but what happened is right around the time I was kind of thinking about doing that, my editor at St. Martin's asked me to pitch an original epic fantasy series to St. Martin's, and he said he prefers something that's its own self-contained world. So rather than historical fantasy, which Julian is set in the 12th century, so I created a new character called Kagan, and I went up selling 2 books, Kagan the Damned. I have to write the first one and deliver it in December, and I haven't started it yet because I'm working on another book. But I'll be diving into epic fantasy. But I do want to come back and play with Julian again. I might create a version of him that works in the new series because I do like the kind of battered, slightly crazy young sorcerer who has, crow familiar and a horse with some real personality. Mm. So I might, or I'll just simply do some more Julian short stories. But it was fun to write a sword and sorcery story with a lot of folkloric background.
I liked it. It seemed like there's a lot of research involved. Now, for St. Martin, there's also your upcoming novel, Ink. What can you tell us about that?
Ink is one of my favorite things I've written. Glimpse is my favorite novel, and it came out 2 years ago. And there's two characters who were supporting characters in Glimpse. One is a tattoo artist known as Patty Cakes, and the other is a very strange private investigator named Monk Addison, who has the faces of murder victims all over his body, tattooed on his body. And what he does is, when somebody's murdered, their ghost kind of comes and asks him to not solve the murder, but prevent other people from being murdered by the same person. And so he's kind of like killing off these serial killers. But there's a downside to it. When he has their face tattooed on his body, he gets a little bit of ink a little bit of blood from the crime scene, has it mixed with tattoo ink, and the artist tattoos the face. It allows him to relive their death, their murder, and gives us some clues to help find the killer. But if he does that, and if he takes this guy off the board, there's actually a cost to the ghost. The ghost is now trapped on Earth with him forever. So he's haunted by all the ghosts of the people whose lives he's avenged. And it makes it a little difficult when you go to bed every night and they're all standing around your bed and some of them scream.
Oh my God.
But the novel Ink takes him and makes him the main character of the novel. In the story, there's someone who has the ability, if he brushes a tattoo that you have, especially one that has really important memory ties to you, the tattoo begins leaving your body and it appears on his, and he feeds on the memory. And once the memory is gone, the tattoo disappears, and your memory of it is completely gone forever. So one character, he steals the tattoo of her murdered daughter, and every day she's losing more and more the memory of her murdered daughter, and this guy is feeding on it. He feeds on the intensity of those emotions. It's a really vile guy.
It's intriguing.
Yeah, he calls himself the Lord of Flies because he has tattooed flies on his body that he can send out and kind of use them to take over people who are emotionally compromised or psychologically compromised, and use them as his kind of like assassins. He takes over a whole motorcycle club, in fact, and uses them as killers. It's a hell of a book. I had so much fun writing it. I did a lot of research in the tattoo community. And it's also set in the same town as my first 3 novels, the Pine Deep series. So I got to bring in some characters from those books. But it comes out November 27th, and it is one of the most satisfying books ever written. You know, it's a standalone, technically, even though the characters in another book. This book is self-contained, and I just loved researching and writing that book. So I think people are going to dig it. It's deeply weird.
I mean, you sold me, man. I mean, I like tattoos, and that I have a fascination with the psychology of certain killers, and the tattoo aspect of it. That's just different.
Yeah, the tattoo community is really interesting. I don't have any ink myself, but I know a lot of folks who are, and for different reasons. And when I interviewed like 200 or 300 people in the tattoo community, asking them, you know, why they got certain ink, what it meant to them. Is it something that they showed other people or not? Has the meaning changed? You know, and there's so many different answers to that. Like one guy interviewed, I thought was the most incredible thing. All the tattoos on his back were negative. They're all bad things that have happened in his life. All the tattoos on his chest were all things that were positive. So he was walking away from the bad stuff and walking toward the good stuff. And his body was a reflection of that decision.
Wow.
How brilliant is that? How beautiful is that?
I've never heard of anything that metaphorically and physically deep before for a tattoo.
Putting it behind him.
There are a lot of people with those types of stories. And this guy was a Vietnam vet who told me that story.
Oh, shit. That makes it even more intense, I bet.
Yep.
I actually have, myself, I only got 2 more questions, and then I'll toss it to Brennan. Pandemica, was that planned before the pandemic? It's a graphic novel series. I see 3 issues released for June 6th.
The 5th issue was just actually coming out this week.
Okay.
But the trade paperback, what happened is the trade paperback was scheduled to come out, you know, at this time. The issue was supposed to come out a couple months ago, but they held it off because Diamond Distributors, who distributes the comics to comic stores, none of their workers are essential workers, so they weren't able to distribute the comics. But I pitched and sold that 2 years ago to IDW. It was long before the COVID-19 thing, and we started. It started coming out at the end of last year. So by the time COVID hit, we'd already been 3 issues in, and people asked me if I wrote it because of COVID. I was like, no, I wrote it 2 years ago.
Okay, my mistake.
But man, you figure you've got massive protests, cities burning, you've got conspiracy theories, government not doing the right thing to deal with the plague. It hits a lot of interesting notes for what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, go get Pandemica. All 5 issues are out now in trade paperback.
I mean, from what I saw, it looks pretty damn cool. And then, actually related to COVID-19, you got it on your website about classes and workshops are strictly online. Is there anything for classes or workshops that you'd like to talk about?
Well, right now we only have one more currently scheduled. It's actually this Saturday. It's called Pitch Perfect, where you actually get to practice a pitch with a literary agent. Not to try to sell it to that agent, but just to get a feedback on your pitch, either a query or an oral pitch. But we just finished a cycle of classes. I'll be scheduling a bunch of new ones, including more Pitch Perfect. Upcoming classes, I think in late August. We don't have the date yet. Will be another one of my 3-hour workshops on writing fight and action scenes. I'll be doing a panel discussion for another class with Ray Porter, who reads my audiobooks, reads the Joe Ledger books, and 2 other writers who use him, Scott Sigler and Peter Kleins, who are both top, horror, science fiction, thriller writers. We've got Act Like a Writer, which teaches you to be the how to manage your career even if you're socially awkward. We're teaching that. I'll be teaching classes on basically how to build a writing business and how to maintain your writing business, things like that. So there'll be a lot of stuff coming up. And if people follow me on social media, just the trick is to spell my last name right. It's Maberry, not M-A-Y. But I advertise the classes ahead of time on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Okay. All right, Brendan, all you, man.
So is that Ray Porter that does your audiobooks the same Ray Porter who will be voicing Darkseid in the upcoming Justice League?
Yes, it is.
Oh, Darkseid does your audiobooks. That's that's really something.
Ray's been my audiobook reader since Patient Zero, since 2009.
Oh, wow.
And went from just a guy who was doing my audiobooks to one of my closest friends. I mean, he's like brother to me. And really one of my closest friends. He's done 20-some audiobooks for me now. The Joe Ledger series, Come My Dead of Night, the most recent Rotten Ruin books, my steampunk Western supernatural novel, Ghostwalkers, bunch of stuff. He's my go-to guy. And I hear his voice in my head when I'm writing. But yeah, he was in the original Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. When Joss Whedon came in, he took out the Darkseid storyline, leaving Steppenwolf as the main character. And who the hell cares about Steppenwolf? So the Zack Snyder cut has, all the stuff that Ray did in motion capture as Darkseid. So they're going to do the Zack Snyder cut. And I couldn't be happier that Ray's finally going to get some major league love, because people have seen him in everything. Argo, Justified, Modern Family, Sons of Anarchy, Almost Famous. He's been in a million things, but he's one of those actors that just fades into whatever character he's playing, so you don't recognize it as him. His voice is distinctive. He's done a lot of audiobooks, and he's a great actor. So I really hope this gives him an opportunity to have a much bigger career, even though I don't want him to stop doing my audiobooks.
Yeah, he's definitely that guy that when he pops up in the show you're watching, you've got IMDb up on your phone before you know it, trying to figure out where you saw him in. So I have one more question that we got whisked away from comics, and I forgot to ask it.
Oh,
so
sure.
you've written a lot of Marvel stuff. So I'm wondering, who is your favorite character to write, or just your favorite character? Is it the same?
No. My favorite character of all time is a cross between Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four. I always liked the smart hero, and T'Challa, smart and tough. Because in the movies, T'Challa is not a scientist. In the comics, he's a scientist on a level with Hank Pym and Tony Stark and Reed Richards. I love those two guys. My favorite character to write is kind of a weird thing, but Wolverine, because I love the introspection. I go inside his head, kind of the samurai viewpoint, which informs a lot of his character. But Deadpool, and mostly as a supporting character. I love writing Deadpool as a supporting character. I used him in Marvel Universe Versus series, and in my Black Panther Doom War series, because he's just so goofy. He breaks the fourth wall. He's insane. I have a kind of a goofy sense of humor, and some of those books, the storylines are very grim. You put Deadpool in there, you get comic relief without it breaking the dramatic tension of the story. So Deadpool's a hell of a lot of fun to write.
The rumor doing the rounds right now is that Ryan Reynolds pitched a Deadpool versus the Marvel, or at least the Fox Marvel universe, for Deadpool 3. Is that a storyline you were involved with?
No, but I hope that's true.
Yeah.
I am not yet directly involved in the Marvel movies. Anything is possible, but I've been hearing some fun rumors about different things.
Yeah, you mentioned, with either Submariner or Doctor Doom, and I've heard those rumors as well. It seems like at least one of those will probably pop up in Black Panther 2. So, hey, who knows? Yep. Who knows?
Yeah.
You'll see your name on those credits, maybe.
It's possible. And there's some other comic book stuff that's out there that not Marvel stuff that I'm involved in. That is, like V-Wars was a comic, and that. Granted, only had one season on Netflix, but we're shopping it elsewhere. My Dead of Night series, I'm not Dead of Night, Bad Blood series I did for Dark Horse is at script level right now. It's not sold, but producers are looking at the script, and a couple other projects I have, and even Pandemic is being shopped right now.
Oh, cool. Jonathan, we've really appreciated you giving us your time for this, man. It means a lot to us.
No, my pleasure. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think needless to say, I can speak for Brennan on this. Seriously, if you want to come back anytime to promote anything, we got you.
Yeah, I'm totally down for coming back. I've got a couple of big things coming out later this year and early next. Actually, one of the fun things that I have coming out in September, talking about middle grade stuff, is you guys have read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, right? The original. Well, I edited the tribute anthology with R.L. Stein and Brendan Reichs and Barry Lag and all that.
Oh, no way.
Comes out. It's called Don't Turn Out the Lights, a tribute to Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It's the official tribute. 35 writers. I mean, it's an incredible lineup of writers, and it comes out September 1st.
That's excellent. That's
so
yeah.
So that and
I'm getting.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll have some Hollywood and some TV news, because there's a couple of projects that, if things go well, we'll be making big announcements soon. And it'd be fun to come back and talk about those things I can't talk about now, but I guarantee you guys would really dig this stuff, because we dig a lot of the same stuff.
Probably.
So I'd love to come back and talk about it once I can talk about it.
I guess my final question for that would be: are you looking to adopt 2 full-grown men for your nephews or something?
I'll call you bodyguards.
Yeah, my wife will laugh. My wife would definitely laugh at that. Hey man, I appreciate your time again, and just so everyone knows, if they aren't already, where can people follow you?
So they can go to my website, jonathanmaberry.com. Again, spell the last name Maberry. I have a website. I have Twitter, Facebook pages. I've got Instagram, Snapchat. I'm pretty much all over social media. Just anywhere you want to look, I'm probably going to find me. Except Very Tinder, cool. I'm not there. Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I haven't dated for like 7 or 8 years.
22 years. So yeah,
you got me beat, sir. All right, well, hey, have a great
come find
time. Well, I already follow you on like 4 of them. Maybe Tinder if you go on that, and I'll join.
That would be weird, man.
Swipe right.
What a terrible way to end this. All right, man. Have a good night.